I edited a film on Afghan women, way back in 1972, and I learned Beaconsfield, you know Beaconsfield, where
Yes.
they make documentary films. There's a school or something like that. I spent lovely an hour or more, a month and more on these things. Oh my God, what is that? Males?
Males, yes.
The first question is obviously the preconceptions of the West and how they see the situation with women in Afghanistan.
Well, that's a $64 question that would take several books to answer it. But the short version is that this is a culture that values, respects women very highly. Now, the way they show that respect is a little bit different from the way we show it in the United States. And the society has a very strong belief in certain values, such as the family and honor, and women are the symbols of all these values. So, because the family is the single most important institution in the society, and the women are the center of the families, you have to protect them. And the idea of protecting them is to keep them out of an environment which is hostile, which is outside the house, because they might be hurt. So over the centuries, the practice of purdah and wearing the veil has developed out of these, basically, respect for women, which I think is quite difficult for us in the West to believe. But it is a very honorable belief. But like so many things, it can be skewed, it can be manipulated, it can be used against women by their own society, and in many cases it has. You have to realize that in Afghanistan there's a big difference between the urban women and your rural women. In the rural areas, women have a very dignified place. There is a mutual respect that develops because women and men have very definitely defined roles, but the roles are all interconnected. If you take just the weaving of carpets, which I'm sure everybody knows about Afghan carpets, this is the ultimate in the interconnection of female and male roles. The men herd the sheep, and they shear the sheep. The women take the wool and they spin it. Then the wool goes back to the men dye it. And then the wool goes back to the women and they weave it. And then the carpet goes back to the men and they sell it. This is the way that male-female roles are interrelated, and out of that comes respect one for the other. So in the urban areas, this doesn't happen. The women are confined to their homes. Their main activities are the care of children and the care of the husband. And they are kept in very spacious houses, but they don't see very much of outside those four walls. But the problem is here, the men, they go out of those four walls. They go to work in a factory or in a government office or in a business office or for trading or something. The women know nothing about what those men are doing. Absolutely nothing. And so when the man comes home, he expects to be taken care of, being given food and his clothes to be ready for tomorrow, and so on and so forth. And so there is not this tight interconnections between them. And during the 19th century, you began to get a little bit of opening up as Afghanistan itself, never mind the women or its society, but the whole concept of Afghanistan on the global scene and as a member of the Committee of Nations, it was looked upon as a hermit nation. Nobody knew what was going on, and you had to have a letter from the Amir himself in order to cross the border. And Lord Curzon had many amusing things to say about how he got this. And Sir Oral Stein, poor man, he spent his whole life trying to get permission to go in and look at the museum in Kabul. He finally got there at the very end, when he was a very old man. He went to the museum and caught pneumonia and died after a lifetime of trying to get there. I mean, but this was a hermit nation and a hermit, a closed society. But at the end of the 19th century, you had some rulers who came to the throne who realized that if they were going to be respected in the world community, they had to do a little bit about introducing education and a government system that was compatible with what the West thought, so on and so forth. So at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, you had rulers who were trying to bring in what we call modernization. And a very big part of the modernization was schools for girls, more freedom for girls. But in 1929, the conservative forces rose, just like they did have now, and they closed all this. But at that time, it only lasted for 8 months. But during that 8 months, all vestiges of any larger participation by women in the society left. But the king, Nader Shah, who came to power after this eruption, he was firmly convinced that women had to participate in the development of the country if the country was going to develop. So he established separate institutions, education, health institutions for women. They were separate because he knew he didn't have the base of power to mix up men and women in a society that had been unused to this before. So, but in 1959, when the King Zahir, who is still in Rome, when under his Prime Minister Daoud Khan, they announced the government support for the end of the institution of purdah, that means locking people up in their room, and also for the end of wearing the belt. But it was voluntary. And that was a brilliant move on his part, because in other countries like Turkey, it was a firman, it was an order, it was a regulation, and you went to jail or suffered if you didn't comply. But in Afghanistan, it was. So those families who wanted their girls to come out, they said, please do, and we will support you. And in the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health, you had growing numbers of women, because those were the two careers that were acceptable for women, because they are an extension of nurturing children at home. So, but eventually, more and more women came out, and there was no career that was denied to women. Nothing except things like sweeping the street or carrying bricks on your head at a construction site. Those were considered unhonorable activities for women. And so they were not allowed. But everything else, the police, the army, the first ones to hire women were stewardesses on Ariana Airlines, which is now in the news. But it was voluntary, and they didn't object if somebody still wanted to wear the veil. But the girls themselves, they came out and they were behaving according to the norms of Afghan codes of behavior for women. And they were dignified, they were very modest, they didn't, they didn't make loud noises and in the streets and so on and so forth. So by their behavior, the rest of the country was watching them, and they said, well, okay, it doesn't seem to be shaking the society. The conservatives have said if you allow women on the streets, then you are inviting sexual anarchy, because by some teaching, women are supposed to be very dangerous animals, and all they want to do is to project their lust and to defer people from their studies and their other work, and we're not to be trusted. But they were seeing all these women walking, and they thought, well, okay, maybe it's not such a bad idea. So this idea began to spread, and it was, well, my husband and I were up in Maimana in a tiny village doing archaeological excavation, and the head of the post office was a woman. And she was, everybody accepted her. So this idea was spreading. And, but this is the crucial thing is when you hear now about, in the nostalgia about, how free it was for Afghan women before all this trouble happened, they forget that even though women were going by the thousands into the education, into the health sector, they were working in offices along with men. They were walking in the streets by themselves without any veils on them. All this is true. But when it came to socializing, they did not socialize with their colleagues at work. They were expected to socialize within the extended family. So when you went off on a picnic, you didn't ask your friends at work. You went out with your family. And the family made the decision as to who you were to marry. And that, of course, was just as hard on the boys as it was on the girls. And by 1978, it was sort of, there were a couple of brave girls that said, I love so-and-so that I've met at work and I'm going to marry them. But even on the highest elite families, I know of one girl who was living in London. She was an interior decorator. She had a live-in boyfriend, and I've never seen anybody so happy in her life. But at some point, and the family, of course, knew this, but that was all right. It was over there. And so it came a point when she got the message, it is time for you to marry your cousin. And she came back. So we had on our hands a very distraught young man. He said, but she loves me. Why did she do this? And it was simply that the family was too strong. She could not, she knew that if she insisted upon staying there, not only her reputation would be gone, but she would destroy the reputation of her family. So these even in the most what we call progressive periods of Kabul's history, the women were coming out, they were contributing immensely to the development that was surging during the 60s and the 70s. They were a part of that, and they were moving with it. But socially, it was still the family that was the most important institution. I see you want to ask a question.
Because it's because that is the context.
Also, long ago, change tapes.
Okay, right. They just got to change tapes.
Oh, yeah.
But can you understand why the West might just see this latest sort of Taliban news and how they deal with women and how they can be outraged? Can you understand the feelings that have been aroused in the West?
Of course I can, because it's so, it's unimaginable. But do we want everybody to be the same? Do we insist that all cultures do things the way we do it? Do we really want to put our frustrations? I mean, look at the frustrations of these feminists. I've never seen really so many unhappy women as feminists are. I'm sorry, but I'm not a feminist. And I don't really understand them. My life has been very happy. I had a father and a husband that was always encouraged me, pushing me, kicking and screaming to do things that I didn't want, but they knew were good for me. So I don't understand them, but I do know that they're frustrated. A lot of them are frustrated old biddies. And do you want to make these Afghan women who are not frustrated? You want to infect them with that? I don't think so. But the problem with understanding is that what is happening now in Afghanistan is an exaggeration of what the values of the society are. What is happening now is not right. It has to be challenged. There is nowhere in the Quran where you're allowed to deny women education. And the Quran is a very equitable, but the Quran now is being interpreted by a group of people who are so ultra-conservative, and they are confusing the essence of Islam with customary tribal practices. And many of them are totally against the Islam. And so what is happening is that they have taken this question of honor, this question of respect for women and so on, and they have skewed it all out of proportion to what it was before. So we have to challenge this. I'm not saying that what is happening in Afghanistan is to be tolerated. It's not to be tolerated. But I think the way to confront this is with dialogue. And we're seeing now all kinds of breakthroughs, small breakthroughs. Do you know that, well, I'm sure you've all heard that people are not allowed to listen to music and they're not allowed to say. Day before yesterday, there was a song sung on Radio Shariat. I mean, these are the little chinks of light that are presenting itself. And also you have to remember that not all the Taliban, they're not a monolith. Not all of them are so heavily conservative. They feel, and they sincerely feel, that these regimes that came before them were aping the West to the point where they corrupted the values of the society by bringing in all these newfangled ideas, and that they were destroying Afghan heritage. They sincerely, some of them sincerely believe this. What we have to do is to say that Islam and modernization are compatible, that by introducing new education systems, you are preserving the heritage, not destroying it. That there is a place for both the Islamic and the modern secular system of education in this society. That a society remains dynamic only when it absorbs and takes unto itself new ideas continually and molds them to their value system. You don't go anywhere if you stay back in the Middle Ages. These are the things we have to challenge this, and this is our purpose for being here. And there are many NGOs that are successfully running schools for girls and so on and so forth. But I don't understand what is wrong with having separate schools for girls. This is objected to by the feminists. I think in a situation like this, we have to go slowly. And if the society would rather keep the girls separate, as long as the same quality is provided for the girls' schools. Sometimes, I know in my country, all girls' schools are very often much better than co-educational schools. So I think that we have to work with the society, not accepting those things that are basic violations of standard, international standard human rights. We have to work towards that. But that's not by imposing what we see is the right way of doing things.
Were you surprised when the Taliban came to power? When they took power?
Well, was I surprised? We were all surprised. Who are these people? Well, you know, well, I mean, I go off on a sideline here, but unfortunately, I think the problem in Afghanistan now is that the education system that has been functioning there for almost 100 years, both the religious and the secular, they failed the people of Afghanistan. They did not teach and prepare the people to think, to be able to make strategies. It was always, you know, rote memorization, and you repeated what it was that you had. The idea of looking, to having a vision. They don't have any leaders with any kind of vision. And that has been the problem since all of this began in 78. And you could say it happened before, but anyway. As far as the Taliban was concerned, I don't think they're any different from the Mujahideen. They are creatures of outsiders. I don't think that Mullah Omar by himself would emerge, but the circumstances and the support he got from outsiders with their own agendas. And this is what makes me so unhappy. Whether it's the women's movement or anything else, there are so many people that have their own agendas and they're using the Afghans for it. They're not doing because they want to help Afghan women or because they want any kind of peaceful solution for Afghanistan. It's all these agendas of the outside world. And that's not fair.
How are the Afghan women you know and have met coping under the
Fantastically.
Taliban? Oh, could you just say that again? Because I was saying.
Fantastically. No, I'm surprised that not all that Afghans that all of them aren't absolutely bonkers. That they're not a nation of screaming idiots because they have they've had their expectations pulled up and then they've been dropped and they've been pulled up and they've been dropped. And how many times can you be dropped and not go a little gaga? But they are very strong people, and the women themselves are even stronger than the men. And you know, apologies to my male Afghan friends and their honor and everything. But the thing is that it's the women that hold these families together. Whether it's inside, whether it's in the rural areas, or whether it's in the city, or whether it's here among the refugees, it's the women that are holding those families together. And the place of the family has become more and more important during all of these troubles. I was in Afghanistan about 10 days ago, and I was both in Kabul and I was out in the countryside. I find that the essence of that culture is functioning in a fantastic way. The women in Kabul, they have all kinds, I mean, the economic situation is ghastly. But they're coping with what they can, and they're making sure that their children are learning their rules and their codes of etiquette, and it's beautiful. Out in the countryside, you see the prosperity is returning, and you have fun. Hospitality, the famous hospitality of the Afghans is working beautifully, but it's in the war zones where everything is broken down. And this is what gets into the news. Happy people are not news. It's only when you've got IDPs and there are horrible things happening.
How long do you think the Taliban will be there? I mean, how will it come to
I
an
will
end?
not predict. Like Lord Curzon, I will not be a fool. But it's difficult to predict because it's not just up to the Afghan. I will say again, it's the region, and not only the region, but faraway countries that are trying to pressure the Afghans into all kinds of things which are not to their advantage. I mean, you know, it's not just the regional powers, it's the world powers also.
But did you think they'd still be here now? The Taliban, would they still be, after these number of years that they've sort of held control?
What do you mean, they'll be
I
here?
mean, I just wondered whether you were surprised that they'd sort of kept a grasp of the country as they have for these years.
No, because the thing is that what's the alternative at this point? The Taliban came into being because the Mujahideen, those famous heroes of the past that we all loved and we all admired, they had come to the place where they were committing unpermittable atrocities, and you had to, there had to be a change. They were victimizing their own countryside. So the Taliban came in, and their first image, gentle, you know, peace-loving Taliban. Everybody loved them. And they did establish security. And when you go into the villages now, and you ask women, you know, how Taliban regime affected your lives? Oh, it's wonderful to have this. I know I can stay in my house. I'm not going to have some mujahid come in here with a Kalashnikov and tell me I have to go there and there. It's wonderful. Security is wonderful. They never mention, wearing the burqa is a non-issue. Not being able to move around is a non-issue compared to peace and security for their families. So when I talk to my Taliban friends, I say, we thank you very much for your physical security, but you can't eat physical security. We have to have economic security. And this, they are not willing, they are not capable, they don't have the know-how to revive the economic system. And I think that this is the greatest threat to the society now. If people are doing, when you're hungry, when you see your child, so when you in economic trouble, things that you would never believe possible are happening. One of the things that, of course, it created a lot of exposure in the Western media is the female beggars on the street of Kabul. We never had that. It is a shocking thing. Nobody thought that this ever could be possible. But when the economic situation gets so bad that professors, for instance, have to sell the potatoes on the street corner. And he is not able to fulfill what society says his role is. But the woman still has to perform the role that she has been given in this society, and that is nurturing the family. She is the one that's responsible for putting the food in their mouths, for clothes on them, and putting shelter over them. And so she goes onto the streets. It's a shame. It's a very shameful thing. And I don't quite see how the Taliban say, oh, we're only respecting and taking care of our sisters. I don't think they see these women. But then you have to realize that over and above this, the women themselves are not beneath manipulating this. And when I'm up there, sometimes I'm very suspicious of these beggars. I don't think they're really begging because they have to.
You've talked about compromise negotiation with the Taliban. Rawa have a different view of that. What do you make of how they approach this issue of women and the Taliban?
Well, Rawa is one of, well, I won't say one, it is the only political group with women. And they have been for a long time. They were Maoist, leftist in Kabul 10, 20 years ago. And then they went underground when the Russians came. That wasn't their idea of what their leftist ideology did not take into consideration the fact that somebody might invade you. They didn't like that. So they went underground and then they came here. So they have, but normally in the society, political agitation, demonstrations, marching in the streets, carrying placards, screaming slogans. This is something that the Soviets brought in, and it is not looked upon as being ladylike behavior. So most of the Afghan women would prefer to work in their quiet way, and there are many of them who are working for the Afghan women in other ways than the political. Political is, the Rawa girls are are quite out of step with their own society. I have met some of them abroad, and I must say I lost my patience with them. They were talking about this to me. How can you do anything with a society that is so backwards and it has this superstitious religion? There's no hope for it. I said, if you want to speak that way, you have every right to speak that way, but don't call yourself an Afghan. I'm not saying that the girls here have gone that far, but there is a perception in the Afghan community here that the Rawar girls, what could I say? They're not really nice ladies.
Oh, yes.
Sort of examples of a more gradual negotiating conciliatory approach to
Oh, that would take hours.
Face me, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Could you just shift a little bit in your chair so you're that way?
Just a little bit on how you're managing to help the women with with the Taliban turning a blind
how
eye.
do you personally deal with the Taliban rather than confronting them, but you can, there are ways
Yes.
that you can
Negotiate.
I don't know. This is Carol. You get that from Carol. I have not been in my libraries are not gender specific. I'm learning the jargon. The libraries are not anything to do with the women's. I mean, the women are coming to me and then they're making me, this is, we want one. So I'm becoming involved in it. But it's not as far as the Taliban is concerned, I don't see this situation as going on permanently. I can't predict exactly how many years it will be going on. I think if the Afghan society itself is given an opportunity, they will change all of this Taliban regulations because they themselves have to put the pressure on whoever is ruling that they want some kind of education or they need. They already put the pressure on for the health system, and now they're putting it on for the education, because education was not important to the rural areas before because it wasn't relevant. The curriculum was completely urban and it wasn't relevant and they couldn't care less. But now here in the among the refugee communities, they have seen the benefits of education and they want it. And they want it for their girls because they know that an educated girl, she can live a healthier life. She doesn't have to suffer and so on and so forth. So they want it for their girls. But the thing is that it's up to the society in the final analysis to make the changes. But so whoever is ruling up there, they have to eventually take into consideration the populace. But when you have outsiders that are calling the shots and are orchestrating everything, you don't give civil society much scope for expressing themselves. But even if the Taliban go tomorrow from the seats of power, they have a saying in Afghanistan, that when a minister is dismissed, that he's Bay Chowki, Bay Motar. He doesn't have a chair anymore and he doesn't have a motor car anymore. And so he's Bay Chowki, Bay. So if the Taliban become Bay Chowki, Bay Motar, they're still going to be there in the society. And they have to be taken, considered in whatever future planning there may be. So the big, the rhetoric is broad-based government. I don't know where the broad-based government is coming from. But the thing that worries me the most is this insidious erosion of tolerance which was a cornerstone of the Afghan character. Afghans were always very tolerant. I mean, they had bad tempers and all this, and if you hit at their honor, they would, eliminate you without a second thought. But basically, if it wasn't hitting their honor, they were tolerant people. If you wanted to do one thing one way, or the Shias wanted to believe something else, it's their fault. I don't particularly want to, but that's their business. That's why when the foreigners came in, they were very tolerant of foreigners. But this is being eroded. A hatred for different groups, for different religions, for different ethnic groups, and so on and so forth. This is what I worry about. This is going to, like an acid, is going to eat away if they don't stop it very soon. This is where I'm worried. But otherwise, I think the culture itself, as they have all along, they are ignoring who is up there in the chowki with their motors. The people are just getting on and coping with it by themselves. And okay, if they tell us we have to wear a veil, so we'll wear our veil. It's a nuisance and it's encumbersome, but as long as we can wear it, we'll wear it. It's a non-issue.
And I suppose the history of Afghanistan shows that,
Yeah, it'll right itself, but we're all very impatient, and I think the closer we get globally, the less we seem to understand each other. So it's going, because so many people are involved, it's going to take the Afghans, maybe. But I think they themselves are getting on with it. They're not so worried. It's just the politicians, the opportunists who are taking advantage of all this on the top. And then, of course, with all of this, we get some very bad practices, again, because of the economic. We've got a lot of smuggling. We've got, which it's blatant. You ride on the roads, well, you don't ride, you sort of bounce on these unpaved roads, and you see 22-wheelers piled high with tires and television sets coming in by the truckload. This is all smuggled goods. And then the poppy cultivation is also growing. But if you, these are, if you write the political and the economic, these other things will settle down, I think. I'm an eternal optimist.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
Oh, God.
You can hold your glasses in your hand. Yeah, that's fine.
So, my guidebook. I started out the guidebook business, which through a very peculiar long story. But I started with Bamiyan, and then I did one for the city of Kobo, and finally it got, so they said, well, do a general guide. And I was working for the Afghan Tours Organization, because they were just starting their tours. If you could imagine, this is a country that didn't have a tourist organization when I first went there. And so this last one, which was in 78, it came off the presses in Tokyo 1 week before the revolution. I tried to stop it, but for once the Afghan government had paid their bills. So it went right through here, but I couldn't stop it. And then they locked it up for 15 years. Basically, it's still there. The country, I argue with my Afghan friends who start everything out. Afghanistan is completely destroyed and we have nothing left and so on and so forth. It's not true. There are certain parts of it that completely bent. There are certain parts of Congress which you think, wow. But there were a large part of the country that was not from the physical. And most of their large religious buildings are still remaining. But then, the Society for the Preservation of Afghanistan's Cultural Heritage, I have so much. We try to raise the awareness to take care of it. And it's mostly those that are associated with religion, they are treated pretty well. But this archaeological site in the British
Do you think that was
now this is one that I think we do have in.
I'm sure you do, but
Yeah.
they love them here.
Yeah.
And I think they're rather scraggly old thing. And yeah, the summertime the blooms are quite remarkable. But no, they don't.
No, okay.
So, but anyway, this is over here. You have this is my store, which is place.
Stick.
Open.
And it's purple tips.
Yeah.
I think that is delicious. And these plants up there.
That's don't ask me. That's a bougainvillea on the top. But it's sort of taken over. Because this is a. See, it comes. It's
And it
annoying.
tumbles all the way down, doesn't it?
I don't know. This is the most remarkable plant because it's find it all through the Mediterranean.
Oh, really?
Find it all through. I don't know about China, but I'm sure it's a global plant. Yeah, Mexico.
Yeah.
I'm sure this is the true global
Oh,
plant.
is it?
Yes, I'm sure.
Oh,
I
far.
can vouch for it.
Oh, that's right. Let's walk up.
Okay, please.